Have you ever heard the phrase cold calling is dead? Do you believe it? Well, let me tell you, I think that's a load of you know what. Cold calling is very much alive and well, and I can't wait to tell you how to be very successful on your cold calling journey. So here we go. So for some of you, just hearing the word cold calling probably makes your head want to spin around, right? I totally hear you. And whenever I talk to entrepreneurs, the first thing they tell me is, whatever you do, Ursula, don't ever tell me I have to make a cold call. For whatever reason, cold calling over the years has gotten this terrible rap. And part of it is because we call it cold calling. Who wants to do cold anything, right? I live in Minnesota now, and it is cold here in the winters. And so when you say cold calling, it makes it sound terrible. I wish someday I'm going to go back and I'm going to figure out who started calling it cold calling and why they did that. And I'll come back here and I'll share that with you because I've been angry at them ever since whoever that is named it cold calling because they ruined it for everybody. But did they? Because here's the thing. A lot of people don't believe in cold calling. So that means they're not doing it, which means there's more room for you. Especially this day and age, no one wants to make a cold call. All that sounds like is hard work. They're like, I'm not making a cold call. That's too much work. I'm not going to call people who don't know me. And I think, great, more for me or more for you if you're willing to do it. And believe it or not, we have clients that cold call. They're probably making a cold call right now. And I'll tell you about that. And I'll tell you some of the success stories that we've seen through cold calling. So hopefully this is first starting to help you shift your belief that cold calling doesn't work. Traditionally, cold calling, like in the beginning of business and telephones, cold calling was what people did. They didn't have a belief that it didn't work. They just believed they were going to pick up the phone and call someone and get business. I know very experienced cold callers who believe they pick up the phone and in that one call, they're going to close a sale. There's also people who call cold calling actually walking into a building. Now, coming out of the pandemic, I think less and less people probably did that or are doing it, or there's more rules around that. But there are people that still do it. They walk into a business, connect with the right person, and they walk out with a sale. So to me, that's a stretch, right? So picking up the phone and making a cold call, that's nothing compared to just walking into a business and expecting to walk out with a sale. People do it. So shifting that belief is where you have to start. You have to actually lean into the idea and the belief that cold calling can actually work, and it does actually work. How does it work? Great question. I'm glad you asked. You have to have a script that actually works when you make cold calls. And this is what most people miss. They just pick up the phone and they try to make a call, and of course they get stuck, right? Because they're not intentional. It's not an intentional script. They're not sure what they're going to say. It sounds awkward. The person on the other end just wants to hang up. Now, back in the day, when I first started my sales career, not only was cold calling a thing, but I was expected to make 100 cold calls every single day. Yes, 100. 100 tick sheets on a piece of paper that I handed in at the end of the day, and it was also marked on a leaderboard. So everybody had to put their numbers up on how many calls they made. I don't think everyone was truthful about it. I was, but I don't think everyone else told the truth all the time. But I would sit there all day on my tick sheet, right, making the little marks till I got to 100 calls. And here's what I learned very quickly. That didn't work either. And my manager kept saying, Ursula, I'll never forget this, Ursula, sales is a numbers game. So as long as you make the calls you need to make, you'll be successful in sales. Well, what didn't make sense to me about that was I was doing that. I was making 100 cold calls every day. I wasn't getting enough appointments. Something was wrong. So being the voracious reader that I was, I went out and bought every book I could on sales and selling. From Brian Tracy's The Psychology of Selling, which is still one of my favorites, and Brian Tracy is still one of my mentors to this day. I read The Sales Bible by Jeffrey Gitomer, which I love that book. It's like Jeffrey's in your face. He's telling you what to do. You got to get out there and do it. I read books by Zig Ziglar to stay motivated and Jim Rohn, and I kept reading. I read a book by the now late Dr. Wayne Dyer called The Power of Intention, and that book was so life-changing for me because I realized that I had way more impact on outcomes than I'd ever imagined before. I quickly discovered that the word intention means to choose the result ahead of time. So I took that word intention and started to blend it with my sales scripts. And soon after that, my sales started to skyrocket. And I started to write my own sales scripts, not the ones that other people had taught me, not the ones that I read in the books. I started to write my own very intentional sales scripts from the perspective of, if somebody was cold calling me, what would I want them to say? How would I want them to connect with me? And within 9 months, my sales were higher than most of the people in the office. And my manager came to meet with me. He said, how do you think you're doing? I said, I think I'm doing okay. He said, we're blown away by your results. Now, this was the manager of the manager. So the one manager wasn't happy with me because I'd gone from making 100 cold calls every day to making 10 cold calls and getting 2 appointments every day with my intentional script. But the other manager was very impressed, and he promoted me to take on a branch in Colorado Springs. And I grew that branch from startup to $1 million in annual revenue in 1 year. And from there, I was promoted into other positions, eventually becoming president of a $20 million company by the time I was 27. And I share that with you not to say, look at what I did. I share it with you because I figured out how to write a script that works, and it still works to this day. I'm going to give you the outline of that script. And, there's some nuances to it, but at least it can help you get started if you're thinking about cold calling. Now, who should be cold calling? Maybe that's a question we could ask. So some of you are thinking, should I be cold calling? If you are calling on other businesses, then cold calling could definitely work for you. If you're calling on individuals, there's a lot of no call, no spam kind of laws that are in effect now. So it's not as hard, and I don't recommend that. So calling consumers is definitely much more challenging. But if you do business with businesses, cold calling is definitely for you. So here's what you want to do. If you're cold calling a corporation, you first want to do research on this business, and you want to know, how could your product or service really help this company? Get specific information. Figure out, because your job is to figure out if you really can solve a problem or meet a need for them. Find out specific things about their company regarding why your company would be an excellent fit. So you want to do some research ahead of time. And then when you call, and let's say in this case, you have a direct number, right? You have a direct number to the person you're supposed to call. In my world in the past, it was IT directors or CIOs. I was calling leaders in the tech world who needed to buy IT training or IT consulting. I'm calling an IT director, and I know a little bit about them, but I absolutely know enough about their company to know how we could serve them. So here are the key elements of the script. And remember, before I share these elements, remember that this is a back and forth conversation. You are the director of this conversation, and your desire is to be able to help this IT director or whoever you're calling, but you can't do that if you don't get an appointment. So you're directing this conversation to set an appointment. So you start with who you are, the company you're with, obviously, right? Introduce yourself. And then this is really important. Say something specifically about their company that made you reach out to them. Why, what did you see on their website? Why do you think they would be a good fit? Or maybe you've worked with other companies like theirs and you've been able to get good results for them as well. So you want to say something specific. Then they'll probably respond, and then you're going to share the problem you solve. What's the number one problem you solve for your clients? And you're going to say that. And again, these are short sentences. This isn't a long story. This is short and sweet. And a lot of times you got to really work on this script in order to get it to where you want it to be. Next, and this is really important, again, conversation going back and forth, you want to share a recent success story. And you probably have a plethora of success stories, but you want this to be a success story. It's relatable to the person you're talking to. So in my world, I would think of another example of a company that we'd work with where we'd gotten them great results in training or consulting. And so I would share that story. Now, of course, you want to be careful. You don't want anything confidential. You don't want to share. So whatever you can comfortably and confidentially share about the success story, that's what you want to share. What you want to do is give them a picture of someone else you've helped that's like them. Because when we see that if I see that you've solved this problem for someone else, I'm much more likely to want to buy from you. The reason I'm calling is to find out if I could help your company get similar results. So I'm pointing back to that success story. And then pause for a second. They might say, yeah, that sounds great. And then give some options for times that you can meet with them. Let them choose a time, and then close the appointment. This is not the sale. This is not the time to get into lots of questions. If they start asking you questions, I would say, Shelley, those are great questions. What I recommend is writing those questions down as you go. And I'll be able to better answer those questions when I understand more about your company, which is the truth. All right, since you've been sticking with me, I have a pro tip for you. Here's the thing. Write the script and then find someone to role play with. It's one thing to have a script, but you have to be able to be active in a back and forth conversation, and you don't want to sound like you're just reading off the script. So practice it as many times as you can. So today we talked about cold calling and whether it's dead or alive. And let me remind you, it is alive and well. And if you call on businesses, I highly encourage you to start cold calling. Write that script, find someone to partner with and practice, and get out there and start to close more sales. If you enjoyed today's video, stick with me because up next, we're going to talk about how you can set business goals that really work for New Year. And remember, your 2X is waiting for you too.